Good morning. Okay, today's daf is Yevamot daf Tzadik Daled. Yesterday, the Gemara asked whether a single witness would be believed to enable a married woman to perform Yibum. And Rav Sheshes used our Mishnah to answer that we would, in fact, believe a single witness in such a situation. And now the Gemara is going to offer an alternative approach to that Gemara. So we're going to begin 5 lines up on Tzadik Gimel Amud Bet, second to last words of the line. So V'ika de Amri, it says V'ika de Amr, but it clearly intends to V'ika de Amri. There's another way to have learned this lesson, that there's another tradition associated with the discussion that we're having. So haloti bailach, that in fact they said there's not a question because that with respect to whether or not a single witness would be believed in order to trigger the mitzvah of Yibum, because she herself is believed with respect to the possibility of going into a Yibum situation. Titanan ha'isha she'amra meis bali tinasei meis bali tisyabeim. That there's the Mishnah. This Mishnah is below on Daf Kufyud Dalet Amud Bet, that it says that we believe a woman when she says that her husband has died in order to allow her to get married to somebody else or even to do Yibum. And so given the fact that we're going to believe her with respect to her ability to do Yibum, we'll also believe a single witness to say that the husband died in order and have her do Yibum. Totally fine. If we believe her, we'll certainly believe an uninterested party. So Kiti Bailach, where should we ask this question? Lemishrei Yevama Alma. That the issue is, and Rashi explains, Yevama Alma, last Rashi, third to the last line in the narrow lines, Yevama Alma, Eid Echad Matira Lashuk, that a single witness will allow her to marry anyone in the marketplace. She'omer la, because he says to her, Meis Yevamech, that your Yavam, the brother whom she was supposed to marry after her husband died. So she's marrying her husband's brother. So she was supposed to marry him, but unfortunately he died. And so as a result, she gets to marry anyone she wants. Or the single witness could be saying, Meis ba'alech va'achar kach meis b'nech, that I saw, unfortunately, that your husband and son died, both died, but I know that your husband died before your son. And so because your husband died before your son, he had a child at the time of his death. So as a result, Yibum and Chalitza do not apply. And then, unfortunately, your son died. So, because if it had been the other order, then you would have had to do Yibum or Chalitza. So in that situation, we see that, again, there is a way that a person can testify that would end up causing a woman who was supposed to marry her Yavam, in the end, she gets to go free and marry anyone she wants. So, so again, where do we ask the question? We should ask the question when a single witness is going to free the woman to marry anyone in the world. My time at the Eidecha, because what's the reason? And we used this almost exact same language yesterday when we initially asked about a single witness enabling Yibum, but now we're going to change one little bit, and you'll see it in a moment. So my time at the Eidecha, what's the reasoning again for a single witness being sufficient to allow a woman to remarry in a regular case where the husband and wife had children? Mishum de Milsa, or there were no brothers. Mishum de Milsa de Avida igluye lo mashakir, because when the single witness, is testifying, he's not going to testify to something that it will become discovered if he's lying, and so as a result, he's presumably going to be telling the truth. So hachinami lo mashakir. So here too, we'll assume that he won't lie, and we'll believe him, even to allow the woman to not have to marry, to not have to wait for the Yavam to return, and say that Yibum does not apply. Oh, Dilma, or maybe maybe what's the reason that we allow the woman to remarry in an ordinary case? It's not because that we say that a single witness is believed when they're testifying about something where the lie is likely to come out, but rather it's because that the Odilma time of day, well, the reason that we believe a single witness, because she is going to carefully investigate the situation and then she'll marry. But in this case, maybe she won't investigate the misna who disannulate because she finds her yavam despicable. And so as a result, she doesn't want to marry him. And so as a result, she'll believe the first guy who comes into town who says that the yavam has died, and she won't do any investigation because she's not interested in marrying. And this differed from yesterday. Yesterday, we said that maybe we wouldn't believe her because she wanted to marry the yavam. So yesterday, again, and of course, in the beginning of today and yesterday, we've said definitively that on some level, we will believe her in that case. We don't apply that. Rav Sheshes has learned from our Mishnah. So Amar Lahu Rav Sheshes. So again, Rav Sheshes is going to say from our Mishnah to Nisua. Again, we have evidence in our Mishnah. So Amrullah Meis Balech. In one of the cases that we had in our Mishnah, we had a situation where they said to her, that first your husband died and then your child died. So as a result, there was no yibum. The niece says, and so she got married to somebody other than her husband. She got married to somebody other than the husband's brother. No, we mixed it up. It was actually the other way around. So Teitze, she has to leave her husband, and whether she conceived before or after her mistake was discovered, it doesn't make a difference. The child is a mamzer. Of course, again, this is following the Rabbi Akiva's position that a mamzer exists whenever there is at least a certain level of lav, a certain level of prohibition associated with the marriage. So now we're going to analyze. That's what the Mishnah said. So Heichidami, what is the specific case? So if you want to say that there are two witnesses who came and said that the husband died and then the child died, and then another two witnesses came and said it was the opposite. So my chaz is the samach kahani. How do you know that you should rely on the second set of witnesses and prohibit her? Maybe you could rely on the first set. They're contradictory. There's no definition that the first set is going to be any worse than the second set. V'od mamzer, and moreover, we said that the child would be a mamzer. But if in fact we're talking about two witnesses against two witnesses, that we should say that the child is not a mamzer, but rather a suffix mamzer. He's only a suffix, because and then moreover, if you want to say, again, we used this kind of language yesterday, if you want to say that the Tana is not being precise, Hamad the Katani Seifa in the end of our Mishnah, where we distinguish between Harishon Mamzer and Ha'achron Eino Mamzer, where the child was conceived before it was discovered, the mistake was discovered, well then the child would be a Mamzer. But the Achron, but if in fact it was after, and they if it was, I'm sorry, before the husband actually died, it would be a mamzer. But after that husband actually died, it would, when the second witnesses come and say that no, he was alive, but now he has died, it would not be a mamzer. So shmamina d'davkut katani. So we see that our Mishnah is being as precise as possible. So so it must be that our situation in our Mishnah is talking about a single witness, and the single witness comes and says that the first husband died and then the child died. So as a result, she goes and marries anybody in the marketplace. But then two witnesses come and say, no, that first witness had the order reversed. And so and so as a result, she needs to leave her second husband. And if she has any children with that second husband, they are considered mamzerim, again, according to Rabbi Akiva. So now the Gemara says, no, it's not a good proof. the time of the asu betray akachushu. And well, now we finished the proof. So let's and then what's the reason? So why do we say that in fact that the second witnesses are believed? Is because the second witnesses are a pair of witnesses. Halav haki muhammad. But in fact, if the second witnesses never came, well then the first witness would be believed. So now the Gemara refutes this proof and says, "La'olam trei trei." No, we can actually say that in fact it is a case of 2 and 2. And how is it a case of 2 and 2? Why don't we just say that why aren't we in a situation of uncertainty, as Rav Sheshes has highlighted? It's because Rav Acha bar Manyumi said in regard to one of these kinds of cases, the Edi Hazama, that we're talking about Hazama witnesses, Edim Zomimim, where the first set of witnesses were testified about that they in fact were with somebody else at the time and could not have actually witnessed the thing that they testified to. So Hachanami be'edi hazama. So here too, we could say that we're talking about where there are edim, where the first set of witnesses is made edim zomim, and so the first set of witnesses come and say that the husband died and then the child died, and then a second set of witnesses come and say, no, you were with us at the time, and as a result, you could not testify to that, and we are testifying, or two other witnesses come and testify that they got the order reversed. In fact, the husband died second, and so as a result, we cannot say, in fact, that a single witness definitively will be believed. So Amar le Rav Mordechai le Rav Ashi. So now we're going to give two other attempts to try and prove that maybe a single witness can be sufficient to allow a woman to escape having a yibum situation. So her husband has died, that we're sure about, but now we don't know whether or not she's triggered a situation of yibum. We know that there are no children at the moment, but the point is that and so as a result, she is connected to the yavam with a zika, with the special connection that exists as soon as the brother dies without children. And so now the question is when we want to take away that relationship and undo that, is a single witness sufficient? So Amarle Rav Mordechai the Rav Ashi, Amrila Rav Acha the Rav Ashi. Some people say it was Rav Mordechai, others say it was Rav Acha, but in any event, what did he say? He cited the following Mishnah: Tashma Ein Ha'isha Ne'amenes Lomar Meis Yevamish Enasa. That a woman is not believed to say that my yavam died, so I could marry somebody else. The lo mesa achosi shekanas levesa, and she's not believed to say that my sister died and I want to marry her husband. I want to go into her house, namely I want to marry her husband. So what can we say about that? Or the Mishnah only talks about the woman not being believed. So the fact that she's not believed, but that implies that a single witness would be believed. So that proof is also going to be rejected. So one second, according to your reasoning, Ema Seifa, what about the end of that Mishnah? Ein ha'ish ne'eman lomar meis achish yabem es ishto. A man's not believed to say that his brother died so that he can marry his wife as a yibum. V'lo meisa ishti she'esa esachosa, and he's not believed to say that his wife died so he could marry her sister. Huni hu delo mehemen. We should say the exact same thing. You want to say that he's not believed. Ha'ed echad mehemen. So then, but a single witness would be believed. But that's not true, because bishlama gabi isha, when it comes to a woman, why do we believe a single witness? Mishim aguna akiluba rabbanan, because of the concept of aguna. That's why we're going to be lenient with her. But elagabi ish, when it comes to a man, there's no aguna problem. He's not forbidden to marry other women. So ma'ika lamemar, why would you ever say that a single witness would be believed in those situations? So elaki itzrech l'Rabbi Akiva itzrech. So what is this Mishnah really trying to tell us by focusing on the fact that the woman is not believed? It's telling us, according to Rabbi Akiva, because Salka Daitachamina, I might have thought, again, remember, Rabbi Akiva is the one who says that a situation of a prohibition marriage, it creates even a simple just a general negative prohibition, that will create a situation that would produce a mamzer. So Salka Daitakamina, I might have thought, however, Rabbi Akiva Yesh Mamzer Mechayvi Lavin, that because Rabbi Akiva says that one who is obligated, violates a negative prohibition and marries somebody and has relations with them, so that creates a mamzer. Maybe we'll assume that because women don't want their progeny to be ruined, they want to have children and grandchildren, etc. So as a result, they would never do anything that puts that at risk. And so as a result, we should maybe believe her, Vidaika, and so she'll actually be very careful. So Kamash Milan, not so. So we see that in fact we're worried that in fact she is not believed, that maybe she won't be so specific, won't be so careful, even according to Rabbi Akiva. And so that's why the Mishnah needed to specifically mention the case of a woman who, the case of a woman trying to testify about the death of her Yavam, or the death of her sister. And so in those situations, we will not believe her. So now we try effort number 3 at answering the question and trying to show that a single witness is believed with respect to free a woman who has a connection through Zika to her Yavam, and freeing her to marry anybody she wants in the marketplace. So Rav Amar, actually, we could say that there's a Kal V'chomer. So given the fact that we believe a single witness with respect to a situation where we're taking the woman out of where if the woman did the act that the single witness is permitting, without that signal witness, she would be chayav kares. Here, by going and marrying somebody in the marketplace, she's not chayav kares. She's only violates the isser lav lo kol shekain. She only violates an isser lav, and so the single witness should certainly believe. So the Gemara says, no, it's not a good kal v'chomer. Amrlei hahum rabbanan l'Rava. So they said, one of the rabbis said to Rava, he atzma tochech. Nah, she herself demonstrates that your argument's not correct. That when it comes to kares, so then that's we allow her to testify about the death of her own husband. But lav lo hitarta. But we just said from that other Mishnah, from the Mishnah that we just cited in the effort to bring our second proof, that she's not believed when it comes to testifying about the death of her Yavam. And so it's an Isser Lav. So as a result, that shows that just because you believe somebody with respect to an Isser Kares doesn't mean that you'll believe them with respect to an Isser Lav. So ve'ela ihi my time alo mehemna. And why is it that we wouldn't necessarily believe her? Because sometimes she's going to find the Yavam so despicable, lo daiko minasva. So she's going to be not careful about ensuring that she investigates the situation, and she'll go marry somebody else. So so similarly with respect to a single witness, because again, when she's testifying, she might not be believed because she might testify only because she doesn't want to marry the Yavam. And so similarly, when it comes to a single witness, the Kavan, the Zimnan, the Sanula, because sometimes she'll hate that Yavam, and find him despicable, so lo daiko minasva. So she won't do the investigation, and it's necessary, and only then marry somebody in the marketplace. So in the end, we have not been able to prove whether a single witness enables a woman who is connected to a Yavam to actually go and marry anybody in the marketplace. Now, the Rambam, both rule that in fact a single witness is sufficient, because we also don't have any proof that a single witness is not sufficient. We just have tried 3 times to prove that a single witness is sufficient, but we've been unsuccessful. The Rush, on the other hand, disagrees. And so in any event, that's where we end up here. And so now we continue with a quote from the last part of our Mishnah. So Zeh Midrash Darash Rabbi Elazar ben Masya. That Rabbi Elazar ben Masya had the following drasha. He said the following. He noted that the verse in Vayikra Parakaf Aleph Pasuk Zion says that a Kohen cannot marry someone divorced from her husband. So he says, what does it mean by divorce from her husband? If she gets a get from someone who is not her husband, that will not prevent her from marrying a Kohen. So in the situation where we're only required, where the husband went away and then died, and then we thought he died, so she married somebody else, and then the husband comes back, since in fact that second marriage was never a valid marriage, even though we're going to require a get from that second husband, we're not going to say that that second husband's get will in fact trigger a prohibition to a Kohen. If they actually had marital relations, that would prohibit her to a Kohen. But if they had only gotten married, only had done Kiddushin, and had not actually done Nisuin, and had never engaged in marital relations, so then he would have to give her a get, but she would not necessarily be prohibited to marry a Kohen. So that was the teaching that Rabbi Elazar ben Masya offered in our Mishnah. So now, Amar Rabbi Yehuda Amar Rav, Hava Leila Rabbi Elazar Midrash Bey Marganisa V'Darish Bey Chasba. He had an opportunity to teach a beautiful lesson, and he chose, that's like a pearl, but in the end, he chose a lesson that is just like a piece of glass. Wasn't a beautiful lesson. So my Marbanisa, what is that beautiful lesson that he could have teach to Tanya? Because we have a brisa, the Isha Grusha Isha. Again, this same language, a woman who is divorced from her husband. So what does that mean? Even if she's only divorced from her husband. And Rashi explains 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 lines up from where it says Mishnah near the bottom of the Rashi on Sadik Dalam. Lo Nisgarsha Elamisha. What does that mean? Get. The man wrote his wife a get, and he says to her, Hare at migureshes mimeni, you are hereby divorced from me, but but you're not permitted to marry anyone else. So a man tries to divorce his wife and at the same time prohibit her from marrying anyone else. So as a result, she is not considered fully divorced, but rather she still has to separate from her husband. That is called Reyach Haget, as we'll see in a moment. So what is the situation? So Psula Lakuna, that even in that situation where the get that was given is not in fact a valid get, she becomes ineligible to marry a Kohen. And this is what we mean when we say that there is a scent of a get, and it disqualifies a woman from marrying a Kohen. And so as a result, if after doing this, the man were to drop dead, and maybe he deserves to drop dead, but in any event, he were to drop dead, unfortunately, she's not allowed to marry a Kohen because that was enough of a get. And again, it was based on the fact that it says, Grusha Meisha, that she's divorced from her husband. So even if she's just divorced from her husband and not able to marry anybody else, we're going to consider her sufficiently divorced to not allow her to marry a Kohen. Now, yesterday we said that, and we're now that brings us to the next Mishnah. And yesterday we said that today we would deal with the opposite situation. So let's take a look. We've been dealing with a husband that goes abroad, and what about a wife that goes abroad? So let's take a look, and the Mishnah will tell us. So Misha halcha ishto l'medina sayam. So now the wife goes abroad, ba'uva amrulo, and now they come and tell him, Mesa ishtacha, your wife died, v'nasa esachosa, and so he goes and marries her sister. But achar kach bas ishto, and now the wife came back. So muteris lachzor. So she, namely the wife, is allowed to marry lachzor lo, turning to Tzadik Dalet Amud Bet. She's allowed to marry, to reconnect with her husband because her husband has not, she hasn't done anything wrong, and her husband has not done anything wrong that prevents him from returning to his wife. So umuter bekrovas ishniya. And not only that, but the relationship that he had with his wife's sister was not a legally binding relationship because the wife was still alive. And so as a result, the relatives of the second wife who become prohibited to, her husband whenever they marry. So, for example, if you marry a woman and she has a daughter from another marriage, you can no longer marry that daughter. But if, in this case, if in fact wife number one were to die, now even though he had married for a temporary period the wife number one's sister, he can still marry wife number one's sister's daughter. He can still marry his wife's niece because the relationship was not, in fact, a legal relationship. Ushniya muteres bikrovav. And similarly, the second wife, namely the wife's sister, is able to be connected to any of his relatives. She's not prohibited to marry them because there was no legal relationship between them. And the Mesa Rishona. And so if the first wife dies, so Mutter Bishnia, he can go back to taking his wife's sister and taking her as a second wife. So Amrulo. Now, if in fact they say to him, Mesa Ishto, your wife died, Vinasa Esachosa, and now he marries a sister. So again, the same situation, except now we're going to say that they had children. And then they said, Kayemis Haisa, actually she was alive, Umesa, and now she's dead. So Havlad Rishon Mamzer. If in fact the second wife, the sister, conceived before the death of the first wife, so then the child would be a mamzer. And again, this is following Rabbi Akiva, not actually how we paskin. But ha'acharon ain't mamzer. But the second, if in fact it was later, if it was after the actual death of the wife, well, then the child will not be a mamzer. Rabbi Yossi Omer kol sheposel al yedei acherim posel al yedei atzmo. V'chol she'ein posel al yedei acherim. Well, that literally means anyone who disqualifies others is himself disqualified, and anyone who doesn't disqualify others is not himself disqualified. But as Rashi notes, the Gemara Mefarshla, we're going to see this in the Gemara. We're not going to see it today, but hopefully we will have a chance to see it as we go forward. But Afa, so now we jump into the Gemara, and the Gemara complicates things a little bit and adds some additional complications in connection with the wife traveling abroad. So we're going to assume that Rachel and Leah are sisters, and they are married to Reuven and Levi, who are not related. So now, so the wife and the brother-in-law go abroad. So Rachel and Levi travel abroad, and now Reuven is told that they both die, and so he marries Levi. So he marries Leah, excuse me. Dahani hani nesuin the kamistera ashes giso agiso. So now that this marriage is effective, that it effectively prohibits. So now, and now of course Rachel and Levi come back. So the marriage of Reuven and Leah is sufficient to prevent Leah from returning to Levi. So this marriage between Reuven and Levi is now going to prevent, Reuven and Leah is now going to prevent Leah from getting back with her husband, who is, of course, Reuven's brother-in-law. Okay, but even though Leah can't get back with her husband, afilu hachi Ashes Giso Asira, Ishto Sharia. And even though the brother-in-law loses out here, so Levi loses out, he doesn't get his wife back. Ishto Sharia, his Reuven does get his own wife back. The Lo Amrinan, Mitosha Nezra Ashes Giso Agiso, Tiaser Ishto Alab. That because he has effectively prohibited his brother-in-law from marrying again his wife, because now he's come back from overseas, and after we thought that he was dead, Levi's come back from overseas, and we thought he was dead, and of course would like to return to his wife Leah, but because Reuven and Leah ended up marrying in the interim while they thought that Levi had died and that Rachel had died, she cannot go back Leah cannot go back to her husband Levi, but we will allow Ruvain and Rachel to continue their marriage. We're not going to penalize them just because we end up penalizing Levi and Leah. So now the Gemara continues and discusses whether our Mishnah is consistent with Rabbi Akiva. So Lema must listen to Loka Rabbi Akiva. Maybe we should say that our Mishnah is not formally like Rabbi Akiva, even though the Mamzer case may have been related to Rabbi Akiva. We don't have to say that the Mishnah is in fact Rabbi Akiva's actual view, because Havila Achos Grushaso. Because in fact, when the wife comes back, when the woman comes back, when Rachel comes back, Rabbi Akiva says elsewhere that the husband, that Ruvain, needs to divorce Leah, Rachel's sister. Well, one second. If Ruvain divorces Leah, then Rachel becomes a divorcee's sister. And one of the prohibitions in the Torah is marrying a divorcee sister. So in that case, Ruvain and Rachel should not be allowed to get back together. But our Mishnah said that they could get back together. So that shows that that Rabbi Akiva can't be the author of our Mishnah. So now let's show that in fact Rabbi Akiva says that in fact a get is required. Titania kol haraya shebetorah ein tzrichas amena get. Whenever somebody marries somebody who is not allowed to be married to, they don't actually require a get in the Torah. They don't actually require a get because it's not a legal marriage. Chutz me'eshes ish shenises al pi basin. The one exception is the cases that we've been talking about for the last week or so of a case where a man goes overseas and a wife is told by a single witness and therefore from the court that she's allowed to remarry because the single witness says that the husband died, and then the husband comes back and it turns out that she's alive. So even though the second marriage was never a valid marriage because the husband was always alive, we still require her to get a get. So that is the one exception of where something that is prohibited from the Torah, an araya, that one of the stronger levels of connection that is prohibited from the Torah, but we say that she requires a get, because ordinarily we say that there is no legal relationship and therefore no get is required. And now where do we have Rabbi Akiva? So here's Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Akiva Mosif that similarly you require a get when it comes to the wife of one's brother. So if one thinks that one had to do yibum, but in fact there was no yibum obligation, well then, and so you marry your brother's wife, so that also will require a divorce, even though it is a prohibited relationship. And similarly, if one marries one's sister, again, these are arayot, but they will require a get according to Rabbi Akiva. So as a result, since this is one of those cases, since that's obviously the case in our Mishnah, right? The husband married his wife's sister, and Rabbi Akiva says that it requires a get. The kaven de Amar Rabbi Akiva by a get, memela itasra alei. The wife should be prohibited to go back to her husband, dehavyale achos grushaso, because she is the sister of a divorcee, and the sister of a divorcee is not allowed to marry the man who divorced the divorcee. The lav itmar Allah. No, we can actually say that our Mishnah is consistent with Rabbi Akiva, because when it came to that ruling, that the ruling that we just quoted of Rabbi Akiva, we had the following teaching. Amar of Gidel, Amar of Rav Chia, Bar Yosef, Amar Rav. It was said in the name of Rav. Hi, Ashes Ach Hechidam. What is this case of the wife of one's brother? What's the situation? It's not a full marriage, but rather Kagon Shekidish Achiv Es Haisha B'Halach LaMedina Siyam. A man did only kedushin, and then he traveled abroad. The Shama Shemes Achiv, and then the man hears that his brother died, and now he goes and marries his brother's wife, to whom only kedushin had been done. So it's only in that situation that Rabbi Akiva requires a get. Why does he require a get in that situation? Because we're worried that people are going to say, ha kama tana havale b'kedushin, that maybe the first husband had a conditional kedushin, because you're allowed to do a conditional kedushin. You're allowed to say, I am marrying you with kedushin only if the following is true. And then if it turns out that the following is not true, so then the kedushin is not a valid kedushin. So we're going to assume that that's what happened with the brother. And so as a result, the second husband actually married her fully legally. And so now when we say that the second husband doesn't require a get, we're worried that people are going to think that women can get divorced without requiring a get. And so as a result, that's why Rabbi Akiva requires a get. And similarly, and same situation with the sister of one's wife, which of course is the situation in our Mishnah. So again, the man marries a woman, and then she goes overseas, and the man hears that his wife, who had only done kedushin with her, had died. And now he goes and marries her sister. So to Amri Inchi, people are going to say, that there really was a condition in this kedushin, whereas and so as a result, he married her totally legally. Ella Nisuin. So as a result, Rabbi Akiva says that in that situation we have to have her get a get, because we're worried that people will think that you can undo a marriage even without a get if we don't require it. So, but if in fact the first marriage in either of these cases was actually a nisuin, which is actually our case in our Mishnah, so mi ika lamemer tana hava le benisuin, are we going to say that Rabbi Akiva put such a condition in nisuin? No, we're going to say that a person puts such a condition on nisuin? Of course not. People do not condition a nisuin, because if you condition a nisuin and then it turns out that the condition doesn't come true, well, then you've had illegal marital relations. And so as a result, nobody will ever want to do that. And so as a result, that's why Rabbi Akiva only requires the get in the case of kedushin, but in fact, in our Mishnah, where we're talking about nisuin, he would not require a get, and that is why our Mishnah is could be consistent with Rabbi Akiva, and in the fact that it allows the first wife to get back together with her husband. Okay, so now Amr le Rav Ashi le Rav Kahana. So Rav Ashi asks a question. If you're going to say that our Mishnah is Rabbi Akiva, if our Mishnah is in fact Rabbi Akiva, listening nami chamoso, why are we limiting the stories that we tell in our Mishnah just to a case of marrying a wife's sister? Why not talk about marrying a wife's mother-in-law, or the wife's mother, namely the fellow's mother-in-law? The Hashamin and Leila Rabbi Akiva, because we heard. In particular, we'll see that that Rava says about Rabbi Akiva, Da'amar chamosu la'achar misa la b'sreifa, that a woman that if a man marries his mother-in-law after the wife dies, he is not and she is not liable to the penalty of burning, implying at the moment that we think that it not only is he not chayav sreifa, but there would be no prohibition whatsoever. Tanya, because we have a brisa. So the Torah tells us that if a man marries a woman and her mother, or a woman and her daughter, so then the man is going to be burned and the women are going to be burned. But the problem is that whoever is the woman that marries first should not have, meaning if he has relations with one and then the other, whichever woman with whom he has relationships first, that woman should not be burned. She didn't do anything wrong. Only the second marital relation between the husband and either the mother, the daughter, in the mother, whichever he has second, only that one should be killed. So as a result, that we're going to have the following drasha. So the es achas mehen, that when even though the word eshen means them, we're going to say that, and Rashi explains the es achas mehen shekain b'lashon Yevani korin la'achas hena. The word hena means in Greek one, and so as a result, it's saying only one of them. Even though in ordinary Hebrew, eshen would mean both of them, we're going to understand this as saying only one of them. And so as a result, only the one who is married second in a prohibited state, that's the one who is going to be burned. Divrei Rabbi Yishmael. That's what Rabbi Yishmael says. Rabbi Akiva says something different. He says no. Oso ve'eshtein, both him and both of them. Now, that's all that Rabbi Akiva says. We don't understand what that means because it could mean a lot of different things. So Abaye and Rava argue about what Rabbi Akiva means. Now, we're not going to ask a question, Bishlam ala Abaye. If we understand this the way Abaye understands it, we don't have a problem. To Amar Mashma'us Dorshin Ikabanaihu. That what Abaye understands as the difference between Rabbi Yishmael and Rabbi Akiva is the following. To Rabbi Yishmael Savar Chadaksiv. Rabbi Yishmael understands that it's applying to one. Rabbi Akiva Savar Tartiksiv. And Rabbi Akiva says no, eshen means them. So what is the situation? So the situation is that in fact the man didn't just marry his mother-in-law, but he also married his grandmother-in-law. And so as a result, the eshen is that even the grandmother-in-law would need to be killed. So the two people who are killed are the mother-in-law and the grandmother-in-law. So if one marries first the granddaughter, then the mother, and then the grandmother and the mother are the ones who would get burned along with the husband. So Shapir, in that situation, it doesn't make a difference. That understanding would not suggest that Rabbi Akiva says that the burning does not apply to a mother-in-law who marries her son-in-law after her daughter's death. But Rava says that what is the difference between Rabbi Akiva and Rabbi Yishmael? It's the situation that of a man who marries his mother-in-law after his wife has died. And what's the drasha? The drasha is when it says Oso ve'eshtehen, it means that only him, as long as both of the mother and the daughter are still alive. So we'll kill the husband and whoever had relations second only if eshen, only if the two of them are still alive. So in that situation, so what do we see? We see that a man and his wife, namely when his mother-in-law, who he's now marrying after his wife has died, if they get married, they do not get burned according to Rabbi Akiva. So why didn't we mention that situation in our Mishnah? After all, our Mishnah talks about situations where a wife goes away, and we get a story that she's dead, and now the man marries somebody to whom he's not allowed to marry until after his wife passes away. And so this is another situation. Why don't we talk about it in our Mishnah? So the Gemara explains, Amarle, Rav Kahana explains to Rav Ashi, that's who we had as the questioner and answerer, Nehida miata kra bisreifa miesura miuta kra. Yeah, you've pointed out that Rabbi Akiva says that the husband doesn't get sreifa from marrying his mother-in-law, and the mother-in-law doesn't get sreifa from marrying her son-in-law in the situation where the wife has already died. But that doesn't mean that it's permitted. And so as a result, it's still, in fact, a prohibited relationship. And so even though the wife has died, they're still not allowed to get married, even if the punishment has changed. And so as a result, our Mishnah is talking about situations where when the wife has been told to have died, the man believes that it's permitted to marry the person. And so as a result, the only situation that's relevant is a husband marrying his wife's sister, because that's the only situation where if the wife dies, now the husband is permitted to marry the other person. And so that's how we'll end for now. And so if you think that all this seems a little bit unfair because the wife got penalized when she married based on one witness, and the man seems not to get penalized, even if the marital relationship that he enters into is one that would have been prohibited when the wife was alive. So shouldn't we punish him as well? That's the question that we'll begin with, God willing, tomorrow.